So this is the first entry for whatever this is, a vlog or just a brain dump. But we've got Tony here today. I'm actually guessing he's going to be out here quite a bit when I do these, but I just don't know what kind of involvement he'll have in the videos since he's not really much of a cuddler. But he does like getting pets, so he probably will jump down soon. You know, the last couple days I've been home by myself. My wife visits her family to, uh-oh, here he goes. Okay, anyway, the last few days I've been by myself. My wife goes to visit her family during the holidays, and I just tend to work. It's an easy time to work. There's not a whole lot of people around. I work remotely, which is pretty convenient. I do enjoy a lot of the benefits of that. But one of the downsides of that is the lack of interaction with other people. Obviously, I can go outside and interact with people, but you know, the day-to-day interactions are far less personal. Emails, chats, that kind of thing. And I'm not an extrovert. I'm definitely an introvert. I'm not somebody who gets like social anxiety or anything. I do get recharging through solidarity, but I also like hanging out with people, like hanging out with friends. I like discussing interesting topics with people. I really like chatting. And when you work remotely, yeah, you lose a little bit of that. There's a little bit of lack of camaraderie among team members. If you have a team that you work well with, I've yet to find a substitution for just shoulder to shoulder, hour in, hour out, day in, day out. Working with people, you can accomplish a great deal of interesting things that I don't think are as accessible in a remote capacity. But that's not to say that you can't be successful doing remote teams and remote work. I don't know that I would recommend it for small teams of people who maybe like, I want to say like a business startup, that kind of thing. It's interesting because the startup that was eventually purchased and then turned into where I work right now was a bunch of people who work remotely, and so it can be successful. But it's interesting because I have noted that the core system was put together very poorly. I mean, a lot of that's necessity out of just they had huge customers and there was a very small team of people, and it was just a mad dash to try and keep the business afloat. I totally get that. So what is it that the thoughts that I wanted to take down? So one thing that I've been really pondering lately is just the value of effort, the value of hard work ethic, that kind of thing. I remember hearing several years ago that the landscape of my generation in the workforce has changed dramatically from the previous generation. So I'm currently 38 years old. My parents are late 50s, early 60s. They're the baby boomers. I'm a Gen X / millennium, or millennial rather. The thing is I probably identify more closely with millennials in a lot of ways. I would say in a lot of my fundamental philosophies around self-purpose, that kind of thing, but I probably am more closely to Gen Xers in, I would say, some of my, I don't even know, maybe I don't relate to Gen Xers, I don't know. So what I mean by that is I've noticed a lot of people my age tend to stereotype millennials as kind of entitled, entitled, not really lazy, but just too idealistic. The reality of the world will never be able to be what they want it to be. There's a friend of ours who works in the medical field, and she was noting that the new doctors, you know, she's a doctor, and the doctors that are of the next generation have this expectation that what they're doing is going to matter. They want to change the world. They want to impact those around them so significantly. And I think that is what I identify with millennials, as I also have that drive to want to impact the things around me in a significant way, in such a way that if I were gone, I would be missed. I think a lot of that ties in very much to a need that humanity, like people have. I definitely have it for myself, and I know a lot of other people have it and have expressed it. Is just this idea that you leave behind something, a legacy of some sort. And over the years, I've found that I think people, in my opinion, people end up having children as a way to kind of fulfill that need for them. You know, you leave a child behind, you leave your name with that child, that kind of a thing. You leave a genealogy. There's a legacy. You will always forever be that person's father, and you know, that person's child's grandfather, etc. But I don't know. I don't find a whole lot of meaning in that kind of, like, everybody can do that. That's the whole, like, if nobody, you know, if everybody can do it, it's not special. You know, everybody can have kids, and you know, generally everybody, like, the normal is to just have kids, right? So there's, to me, nothing special about having kids. So I've wanted to impact in other ways, impact the world in other ways. How could I influence those around me? And I mean, over the years, I've done my best. I mean, that's the thing, is you try to make efforts. There were years of my life where I would spend time volunteering and doing teaching for technical concepts to anybody who was interested in, and the companies around the city where I lived at the time would offer their offices as a venue, and I would, you know, do presentations and teach classes on programming and databases, and you know, basically whatever people wanted to. And I did this for years, and I had a great charging scheme. I don't know, it wasn't a profit scheme, but this is the way it worked, and it worked really well. It took a while for me to figure out to do this, but what I would do is I would make these classes available, and they'd be like 8 sessions, once a week for 2 hours on, say, like a Wednesday night or something. We'd figure out what day works, and you would meet for once a week for those 2 hours, and we would go through topics, examples, and then I would actually assign homework. You didn't, you know, none of it's required. It was all voluntary, of course, but you paid $400 up front for the course. So it's 8 classes, 8 sessions for one course, and it was $400. But for every course that you came to, you get $50 back. So if you came to all of them, it would be free. And I ran on this model for years and made thousands of dollars doing this, because people think, oh yeah, this is great, I'm gonna just, you know, learn something new for free, but they have to put forth the effort of coming and all that kind of stuff. Because if I'm gonna prepare for somebody and they don't show up, that's frustrating. I don't want to, you know, but if they don't show up, they just gave me $50 and it was worth the preparation for that, right? So it seemed to be a pretty decent model, and it actually worked really well as far as making money, because these people would sign up and then drop after 2-3 weeks, and you know, is there something I can teach better, or other topics that you weren't expecting this is what this was going to be about? Is there something? Everybody was like, no, it's great, I'm just lazy. And I understand, I'm lazy too. I'm constantly looking for shortcuts or easy emotional wins. I think that's just the nature of humans as well. But anyway, I have tried to do all these different methods of making value for others around me. But it's all for selfish reasons. It's all because that's my desire, my need to leave a legacy, you know, to impact somebody somehow. You know, when it gets to the point where I die, I think a measure of your worth is how many people attended your funeral. You know, and I don't know. That's one of the things that I've kind of latched onto is this concept of impacting other people's lives and leaving a legacy. And as I've gone over the years, that has been cynical, that has been sincere. There's been a lot of back and forth on that, and one thing I've learned is that you don't really ever know, and your opinion in the here and now always seems way more potent than the opinion that you had a year, 5 years ago, whatever. I think of some of the cynical thoughts that I had around, say, having children. I gave an example of, I don't think it's anything particularly special, and I think a lot of people do it. There's a biological need, obviously, to propagate the species, but there's also that I can leave a legacy, and this is an easy way to leave a legacy because I just have fun for a few hours, and bam, I get one later. But I used to be a lot more cynical about it, like, oh, introduced into this world of crap. There's so much violence and so much hate in this world. But as the years have gone by, I've kind of changed my point of view on that. I do think that there's a lot of hate in this world. There's a lot of violence in this world, but I don't think that there's any more now than there has been throughout all of human history. And in fact, I think arguably there's less of that now than there has been throughout most of human history. A lot more is in check, and I think one of the reasons why it seems like there's so much hate and violence now as compared to other parts of history is that, well, you can see about it, you can hear about it now. 100 years from now, there was no such thing as a cell phone. 30 years from now, well, there were some prototypes, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like, mainstream, the ability for people to communicate across the world at the level that we do now is very recent. And there's going to be some people who were born into this, and I was not. I was definitely a child of the 80s, and I remember the phase out of the rotary phone, and I remember the phase out of the cassette players, and all those kinds of things, and the predecessors of generations from me were experiencing similar things with the 8-track and vinyl and all this kind of stuff. And looking at that in that context, I realized that I'm just another cog in the wheel. I'm not special. I'm experiencing the same thing that everybody experiences, and from that, I've drawn some really interesting questions that I like to ponder on, and they're questions I don't know that we can ever find answers to, but what I do is I like to consider them, make assumptions in either way, see how it plays out, and see what seems more in line. I mean, it's more of a empirical experiment than a theoretical, or I guess a theoretical experiment to try and get some empirical data. So let me give you an example of that. I realize I'm nothing special. I'm no one special. I'm just another person doing just all the same things that everyone else is doing, and it made me realize what fundamentally is different between myself and, say, the person right over that fence there. I don't know. I mean, we have a different biology. We're obviously different entities. There's a person over there. They have similar makeup as me, but they're different. They're genetically different. They're biologically distinct. But what about the driving mechanism behind us? I don't know, you might want to call it the soul or the energy source or whatever it is that motivates us, the nature of us. A lot of people will argue that the inclinations of people stem from the evolution of them. I'm not going to debate here evolution versus creation, anything like that, but if we were to consider that as a reasonable hypothesis, that yeah, over millions and millions of years, the scenarios that our species have dealt with and overcome have put us into a place, all the scenarios that our species have overcome has put us into a place where we have natural instincts that were kind of like programmed into us that give us these inclinations, that biological need to propagate. Well, that was because the ones that didn't have that need and didn't want to didn't propagate as much and didn't succeed, and the ones that did have that need propagated, and here we are. So that's a real basic conclusion drawn from like that evolutionary standpoint. That evolutionary standpoint. Well, if that's the case, then all of these inclinations I have, these drives I have, are not me. They're my nature. and the person across the fence has the same and similar inclinations, and it's not them, it's their nature. And so a lot of this is I'm starting to identify that we're kind of all the same. Like my cat, he is just doing what his nature tells him to do. I do what my nature tells me to do. Now, I've glossed over the huge line of sentience, but in general, a lot of I think there's been lots of psychology studies, and you know, with a grain of salt. It's hard. You can never prove anything like this. It's always just kind of anecdotal, in my opinion. But it's interesting. Again, food for thought. Interesting to think about the conclusions that have been drawn by others that the conscious self doesn't actually have as much control as it thinks it has. I think it's probably reasonable. It's essentially that the mind makes decisions before your consciousness knows about it, and then you get the illusion that you've chosen that result. And I'm not going to talk about like fate and that kind of thing, but more along the lines of, if our conscious decisions, if our sentience that we value so highly is driving us to make decisions that we feel so strongly are independent of our nature, or independent, like they're controlled entirely by our own thought, is deceiving, because it's actually driven by your subconscious, which can be argued as driven by nature. Your need to fight or flight, your need to all that kind of stuff. And so if that is so heavily influencing your conscious decisions, do you really have that freedom of choice, that free will? Is kind of the question, and again, there's so many nuances to that conversation. But I still, what I'm enjoying right now, anyway, the food for thought that I'm enjoying is that concept that the nature that's behind us is all the same. We're all the same that way, and not just humans. And there are different variations of sentience, and this is one thing that was kind of a new concept for me. I kind of really dug in and started thinking about, dolphins, gorillas. They're self-aware. They know about themselves, and that's huge. There are a lot of creatures out there that have self-awareness, and what exactly is self-awareness? What exactly is sentience? I think that's debatable and arguable, but I think no matter what definition you come up with, you can find more than just humans, unless you really have a strict definition of sentience. But then you could find more than just humans that would be considered sentient. I mean, you hear about these gorillas in captivity who are shown pictures of people and gorillas and label which ones are which, and they always put themselves with the people. Like there was a gorilla that did that. Those types of things, they are self-aware. They know about themselves in the universe, yet they are still driven by their nature. And I'm starting to toy with that idea, like, if I was given the biology of a chimp, I would be that chimp. If I was given the biology of my cat, I would be that cat. And the only difference between myself and my cat is our biology. Our nature is the same. We've derived all of our inner workings based off of millions and millions of years of evolution. And so it kind of pulls that equality to the next level. Like, we not only are all humans equal, but it's just like all things. There's really very little distinguishing between a chimp, a squirrel, a human, because we're all just different entities in different biological capsules. But that drive, that nature driving us, is all the same. And so, I don't know. Those are just some things I've been thinking about. I find them very interesting. I think also with that, there are questions that come along of like ethics, the implications of your responsibility, because we do have this level of sentience, this level of self-awareness that clearly there are some animals my cat does not have. Arguably, humans are the only ones that have this level of self-awareness that can understand major consequences for actions for those around them. I don't know what kind of sentience other animals, dolphins, whatever they might have. I don't know if they're capable of that level of thought. And so if humans are the only ones capable of that level of thought, and we are likely are, does that then imply some level of ethical requirement, obligation? Are we then obligated to ensure the survival of the other biological capsules around us? And I don't know, I tackle with that one. Like, I don't have any desire to go out and start making life difficult for anybody, any creature, anything. But at the same time, nature selected humans to evolve the way that they did. And so it is by the very nature of nature that we are who we are and what we do. And those cynical things that I was talking about, those cynical ideas of like all this selfishness and all the hate and violence that you see is just nature. It's nature playing out. And it's kind of meta because we know better, yet we're still inclined and making all the same decisions as if we didn't know better. We are overwhelming the environment in which we are in. You take any animal, a lion, and you provide it an environment that it's so easy for that lion to exploit, it will do exactly what humans do right now. And that's nature, right? So like, that's not evil. There's no ethics there. That's just nature doing its thing. Now humans do that, but the argument is we know we're doing that and we shouldn't do that. And I guess this is kind of the answer. The question I'm tackling is why shouldn't we do it? Again, I don't want to, but we shouldn't do it. I mean, the long-term implications of the damage that could be done to the planet, those kinds of things, obviously very bad. But just ethically speaking, is there an ethical obligation for us to not do it? I don't know. I kind of struggle with that. It brings into question a lot of the claims that, you know, people have about the impacts of humans in the environment and all this kind of stuff. And again, I don't want to go out and start making the environment worse. I definitely want to reduce my footprint on how much I impact the environment. But I don't know that there's ethics in that. I think that's just a personal choice for me. I don't know that I could turn to somebody who chooses not to do that and think poor and have any justification for thinking poorly on that person, because they're just following their nature, and their nature was given to them by nature. Does that make sense? If the nature of evolution has provided the inclinations of man, so it's not, I don't know, I just don't think that it's an ethical dilemma in my opinion. But this is a great thing about opinions, is they can change day to day, hour to hour, right? So who knows, maybe on my next video I'll have changed my mind about this. But this has probably run on far too long, but this is an entry. This is an example of what types of things I'm going to be discussing. Like I said, these are the topics I generally shoot with my counselor, and giving this a try. So if you feel so inclined to leave comments below, I'd be happy to chat back and forth with you. But I'm not expecting anyone to watch these or comment on these. Again, these are for my own personal betterment. I don't know, experimentation with personal growth. And then who knows, maybe a few years from now I'll be able to collect enough information and put it together in a cohesive way that I could write a book that someone else might be interested in reading. I still can't see that happening. I don't know why anyone would be interested in that. But then again, I don't understand why anyone uses Twitter. So clearly people do things that I don't understand, and that's okay. Yeah, so I'll see you next time.